Hare Krishna. We're back to some discussions regarding 50 years in ISKCON. More than that, no. And as I've done in the past, I will do a few years, and then when I'm describing things, I'm describing them as I experience them at the time, not really thinking back, reflecting. So I started making some reflections every few classes, and just to actually think from the terms of like looking back, how do I see that time now? And so I should have really done one a few classes ago, I think, because now what I'm doing is from 77 to 88. I'm doing 10 years of reflection. And so it's taken me a little while to do this because, you know, as soon as I start thinking, this whole era is like full of so much that went on that to reflect upon it is, wow, there's a lot there, you know. So obviously I'm not here to cover all these, just some reflections from my own experiences, that's all. And so we'll start, and first I will offer my obeisances to all the wonderful devotees. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasinavevcha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. And to Srila Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatmanandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurum Militan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we'll go back and reflect on after Srila Prabhupada's departure. Of course, you know, looking back, immediately I'm just thinking just how young, how inexperienced, and how naive we were. And how in Srila Prabhupada's presence, we felt a lot more than what we actually were. He radiated, you know, his Krishna consciousness, and, you know, so deeply kind of into us that somehow we thought it was our own. And I think, at least in some cases, we overestimated our own Krishna consciousness, you know, thinking like Prema's just around the corner or something. But in the absence of Srila Prabhupada, became so apparent how far we had to go, and that we were really, you know, just skimming the surface, and that there was a huge gulf of difference between knowledge and realization. We knew a lot. Prabhupada told us a lot, and we were just sponges, just sucking it in. But realization, that is something else. Jnana and Vigyan. This became more apparent in his absence. It became so clear how much he was carrying. He was carrying everything. How much it's like he was just holding up the whole of ISKCON, holding up all us babies. And, you know, the gradual understanding, I'd say, or the understanding or the unfolding of just how extraordinary Srila Prabhupada was. How extraordinary that he transported and transplanted an entire spiritual culture to us in such a short time. You know, and uplifting and empowering, like animal-like young people, you know, where we were coming from, to really embrace spiritual life with deep intensity and sincerity. You know, this is this is as miraculous as Lord Chaitanya and Jarikhanda making the animals dance. Really, it is miraculous. And, you know, even historians and sociologists are gradually, you know, beginning to note what Srila Prabhupada did was miraculous. Yeah, I just saw something by yesterday, something Narendra Modi, you know, said, and how much he was just amazed by Srila Prabhupada. You know, so gradually, over time, people will understand more about what Prabhupada did. And, you know, despite whatever his followers have done, continue to do, but I think that this growing awareness of Srila Prabhupada's greatness, and just how fortunate we were to participate in this truly miraculous unfolding of a prophecy of great historical importance. I think that is what kept ISKCON from falling apart. We're all unqualified, we're all, you know, but, you know, there was so much feeling for Srila Prabhupada, and that was genuine. And I think that is why we didn't completely fall apart, although it was tough going. And still is tough going, but we're alive. And, you know, because up to the point of Srila Prabhupada's departure, I mean, ISKCON was pretty much the same everywhere in mood, in demographics, in attitudes and culture. You know, I mean, of course it was different in different places, but not really significantly. You know, Krishna consciousness was one thing, and you had to just swallow it whole and, you know, not take bits and pieces. And you were either all in or you're all out. You know, there's one way of doing things, and you worked under an authority and you served all day with no pay. And of course, this is fairly easy with one leader, Srila Prabhupada, who we all trusted implicitly and who we all wanted to please and to follow. So, I mean, not to say, of course, during Prabhupada's times there was tons of controversy and problems and struggles and, you know, some diverse views, you know, but, you know, that was all small compared to, you know, what would come. And, you know, up until then, you know, there were struggles, but mostly a positive spirit. To, you know, we just keep trying, we pull each other along, and we were proud to be devotees. And we had some degree of respect for, you know, pretty much everyone who was trying to do it, you know, to build the first bhakti institution in the West. You know, and then of course, after Srila Prabhupada's departure, then a whole new world opened up. And not immediately, but it gradually descended into a decade or two or more of turmoil. And major changes ensued, you know, the problems of succession. Establishing new gurus, adjusting to the void of Srila Prabhupada's absence left, and, you know, a host of other issues related to just trying to keep the movement afloat. And certainty and confidence and positivity were kind of replaced, not replaced, but there was a lot more questions, different ideas, factions, dissension, revelations of deviations, fighting, broken hearts, and disappointment. And it was shocking. It was shocking. And this was, spread out over, this decade after was really something. And of course, these years, they're depicted in very different ways, by different devotees, depending on their own experience and when they joined and their age and the leader and what camp they might have been in. And, so there isn't just one way of seeing it, but there was a lot going on. And I have no intention to try to convey, all what was happening or what was right or wrong. There were very deep issues, both philosophically and institutionally, that, are ongoing. And, but I think there's one thing, we can agree on, whether we're a guru or a GBC or a regular devotee or a disciple, is that these were difficult times and challenging times for everybody. Only different types, different types. So, my intention here is that I just think it behooves us, each individually, to reflect on how we dealt with the challenges. Knowing what we know now. What can we do differently in the future? It's not like difficulties and challenges are going to go away. They're always going to be there, but if we can learn some lessons and become more mature, so we need to learn how to deal in a way that will propel us forward. And that is, of course, it's a huge topic. And it's not my intention here. It is to, just at least to try to identify some of the common ways that we dealt with those times and identify some misconceptions and some syndromes and behavioral patterns that inhibited our progress. So this is the ongoing life of a sadhaka, Well, even materially, people have to reflect and try to see what we need to learn, what we need to change in ourselves, in our institution, in order to do better in the future. And, these are very relevant topics, as, difficulties are going to be there, whether it's guru issues or something else. I can imagine when all the Prabhupada disciples are gone, there'll be whole new worlds of problems. Not to be too negative, but let's be realistic. What are we going to face, and how will we face it, and how can we face it better? But, we should know that every organization goes through these kind of stages and phases of challenges, It's not something new. It's not something unique and special to ISKCON, especially any other religious organizations. You'll see the same issues and phases, So it's not that we have challenges, but how we deal with that will determine, our degree of success or failure as individuals or as a society, So I want to first point out one of the first, I guess, very glaring mistakes that we made, which I think everyone agrees on now. But it's always good to repeat, as history really does repeat itself over and over. And unless lessons are deeply imbibed, you just get the same stuff happening over and over, but with a slightly different dress, you know. So our first, I would say, I mean, these are all my subjective views, first big misconception that led things off track straight away was to assume that the next generation of gurus would serve almost in the same capacity of Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya. So this is like when you're doing some long mathematical equation. You know, if the first equation is wrong, everything that follows is going to be off. So, you know, this first equation here, calculation, make all the calculations wrong. So here were these very inexperienced young men, vastly less qualified on every level than Srila Prabhupada, thinking they would do things in exactly the same way as Srila Prabhupada. And regardless whether it was sincere misunderstanding or whether, you know, it was a firm belief that this was the right thing to do, or if they also felt pushed to do that, you know, whatever the reasons, it was very foolish. And so the result of that miscalculation was that there was a tendency towards what I will call the imitation syndrome, kind of fake it till you make it. And just try hard to act the part, thinking, well, you know, this is how Srila Prabhupada did it, and we will do the same. And that's a huge blunder. And unfortunately, it took quite a long time to correct this. I mean, now there are courses and books and many classes to explain how Srila Prabhupada's position as the founder Acharya is very, very unique amongst all, and not in any way to be imitated. So we have at least some understanding now that there is not just one type of guru or one way for a guru to function, and that not all gurus are equally qualified. And of course, this is like a huge topic, and I'm not going there. But we do understand that there is wide diversity. It's not one thing. And but the main thing to understand is that there's a world of difference between imitating and in following in the footsteps. Imitation, it means pretending. And the problem is that if you pretend long enough, you can start to believe you really are the part you're playing, and eventually lose touch with one's own inner world, inner reality. And then that leads to dishonesty and arrogance and a lack of authenticity and integrity. It can lead. I'm not saying everybody is the same or all the results were the same. I'm just saying that these are tendencies, and they were there in many, and not just, this is not, it's not like pointing finger at these gurus. It's a lesson for us all. It's not, oh, I will have to check the battery here. It seems like it's, oh, I'm not sure what happened there. I think my battery went dead, and now I'm starting another video. I'll have to check this later and see that it's okay. Anyway, I hope we're plugged in properly now. I'm just, not a technology person. These are difficult things for me. But anyway, as I was saying, that, all these things, these are lessons for us all. Not just gurus. It's not just gurus who play the imitation game. It's very common, and it's a very dangerous game, especially when leaders play this game. This mood, it tends to filter down to those beneath them, who also become infected. Yes, it's a contagious disease with this sort of fake spirituality. The tendency to talk and dress and act as we imagine an advanced good devotee or a guru should. But this kind of imitation spirituality, it mimics true spiritual realization in a way that, like, leopard skin fabric imitates the genuine skin of a leopard. So, the disease, it reaches a critical stage when we believe ourselves to be at a level of spiritual enlightenment or mastery that is far beyond our actual level. So, often when one is playing the imitation game, it results in one beginning to feel special, to be, chosen, a sense of entitlement and a sense of superiority. And you may even start acting like a big shot, VIP. But this may be very subtle and maybe not even be externally visible. But all of this, this tendency, it is diametrically opposed to the very foundational principles of spiritual life. Trinadapi sunicena, tororapi sahisnuna, amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. Such a stage to come to. When, oh when, will that day or that lifetime or that ever come? But that is the foundational principle. Without that, there's a lot of imitation. And anyway, from the problem with the imitation game is that when you lack purity, you don't have the same kind of potency to inspire people in the way like Srila Prabhupada did. He just lifted us, inspired us because of his purity. So, thus, in order to get people to follow and to get them to do, maybe what's needed or what you want, then you need to use other tactics as a substitute for purity. And again, not just gurus at all. These are very common things. So maybe, though, let's just call this syndrome, another syndrome. Just follow the authority syndrome. Yeah, of course we're supposed to follow authority, but in an appropriate way, in a mature way. That's another, it's another class. So, because the tendency will be there then that you use your position to dominate or to lord it over, or to get people to do things. Or, rather misuse the hierarchical structure. So, and even if the intention is good, the methodology is not, so this syndrome, it can be used, in hundreds of ways, and it continues to hinder our progress individually and collectively. Yes, we are supposed to follow authority, but not in a blind or coerced way. So, this is not, no doubt, it is very, very difficult to push forward the movement or to lead or to be any kind of leader in any way. It is very, very difficult. And all glories to those who try and who have tried. But during these times especially, we saw how, there were very hasty decisions were made regarding very big issues, and they were just very rapidly instituted in an attempt to guide and hold ISKCON together. I'm sure that was the intention, at least for most. I mean, some people will say other things. But unfortunately, the methods used to enforce these viewpoints and policies that had just been created, the methods to, enforce them were often heavy-handed, or manipulative or harsh, and caused further divisiveness amongst the devotees. So I'm going to go through just a few of these tactics, because we need to learn to see red flags. We need to learn ourselves, what are we doing? And so I'm just going to point out a few tactics that, they've just been proven to be outdated and unproductive and even destructive, because they are still in use. It's not like, all this is, we learned everything and now we're all perfect. Not at all. There's so much to learn, So, one of the points was, of course, different devotees had different ideas after Prabhupada's departure about gurus and about how things should be done. For example, there was Pradyumna, and there was a whole group of devotees, many devotees, who had concerns. And Pradyumna had written a letter. Pradyumna, who Prabhupada always saw as scholarly and not a political person and not in management at all, so no ulterior motives there really, he wrote a very well-written letter, and it was really just dismissed. And, and then there were also immediately some people, bringing up these Ritvik ideas and things. And of course, we don't agree with the principle, but there are many points. There's always points that people are making that are worth listening to. I mean, it took, I don't know, it's 20 or 30 years, they finally made an apology to Pradyumna, because he made very good points and he was seeing off into the future. If you do it like this is what's probably going to happen. So this is such a big lesson for us, people had, our God brothers, our God sisters, and, new people to be new disciples. They had legitimate concerns. When people have legitimate concerns, they need someone to listen to them. And now, granted, there's some people that, are just in their own thing, and, but a lot of devotees were just sincere. They were uncertain. That is very natural. So, but they were not heard respectfully. They were shut down. They were silenced. There was suppression of discussion. There just was no room for hearing these varying viewpoints, So, oftentimes when people are not agreeing to things, and this, again, I'm bringing all this up not to point up, oh, these are the bad guys that did this, but this is done so much in management anywhere that, those who opposed the viewpoint that was being, presented were, demonized or marginalized, or, and when you do that to somebody, what does it do? It doesn't help them to embrace your ideas. It makes them dig their heels in further that I gotta support my own view. And then it just creates more divisiveness, and using also strong-arming, or just kind of forcefully cramming the correct view or behavior down, devotee's throat. So rather than addressing a person's, position or their view, we often just attack them personally. Oh, he's just, this or that or the other thing, rather than what he's saying, what his viewpoint is, what his, just attack the person. What is that, something ad hominem argument? And it's known it's a very bad way of arguing. It's not the right way. There are right ways to teach and to convey philosophical points, in just a correct way, But instead, you would get, a lot of intimidation, that devotees were afraid. You follow or else, what? Then you might lose your service, you might be rejected, and that happened to devotees. Or gaslighting, that was very common. Of course, we didn't know that word then, but guilt-tripping, guilt-tripping devotees into doing things that maybe they didn't want to do, making them feel that they were, not surrendered if they didn't cooperate, or they're not good devotees, and, pushing this word surrender and submission and follow your authority in very manipulative ways, Yes, manipulation, that was, using Shastra as a hammer, to manipulate devotees to do things that they may not have been convinced of, especially, to take initiation from someone that they didn't want to, or later to force a re-initiation. Oh, that's just awful. But all of that all went on. And of course we're aware, everyone's aware of that, the zonal acharya system itself, it's like a lot of people feel that the system itself was a problem. Personally, I think they're missing the point, The reason there were zonal acharyas is because all those people, they already had zones. They were GBCs. 11 gurus were amongst 23 or so GBC members. And so they already had some zone. So of course it's natural you join in a zone and you're listening to a certain person. So it may be very naturally follow that you may, that person may become your guru. But that can't be forced. It isn't, historically, our acharyas did have zones, kind of, Narottam, Srinivas, Shyamananda, they had their areas. And mostly the people in those areas were their disciples because they were pure devotees, very pure acharyas. So, the thing is it's never the system, almost any system can work. It's the person, but what was totally wrong was to mandate that people have to take Diksha, from the person where they are. and that other spiritual masters couldn't give initiation, in another zone. I mean, it just seems so crazy now. To think we could tell someone who to love and, where to place their faith. It's just so wrong and so arrogant, So I'm not, looking at the motives. Sometimes, our motives are pure, but the way we go about doing things are just wrong, So, and of course, when you talk about these tactics, it sounds bad, sounds really horrible. But, oftentimes they were used very expertly. It wasn't real obvious all the time. The ways, that sometimes people, the way it seemed very Krishna conscious and very using Shastra and, preaching in a way that would, convince you that you need to go along with something, so I don't say the intention was insincere, but the thing is that, because someone may question, well, why did you let people do that to you, or why did you go along with that, because it wasn't always so obvious, and these are people that we respected and that we had relationships with, and, so it wasn't like so, sometimes probably it was, but wherever I was, it wasn't always so obvious. It wasn't just like nastiness. It was just, Anyway, these tactics, they often, they work in getting others to cooperate. So some may think that the end may justify the means. As long as we keep the movement together and, But in the long run, it's just truly not effective. Because as they say, one who is convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So ultimately the need to utilize such tactics, it reveals inner weakness and insecurity, and a lack of purity and genuine love. That real strength is shown when a leader can, he can humbly and sincerely admit sometimes that I don't know. I'm just learning. It seems to be this way for me, and I can present to you this, and then you have to make a decision. A truly strong leader is capable of doing this and allowing followers to grow in their own time and learn to make their own adult decisions, right or wrong. Krishna allows us that, so we have to allow that, Because, we've seen that when you use these, they're very kind of patronizing tactics and attitudes, tend to create a kind of crippling parent-child dynamic, which just doesn't allow people to grow, to be mature adult devotees and people. So that's an offense. A leader is meant to help students reach their highest potential, maybe even go beyond them, not keep them like dependent children who are unable to think for themselves. That is not Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada said, devotees are meant to be independently thoughtful. Krishna consciousness is voluntary and spontaneous, and that is healthy devotional life. Yeah, sure, sometimes people need a little pushing and a little heavy, whatever, but, always with the right motive. And So then I'll go on. I hope this just isn't coming off so negative. But you know, we have to learn. We have to learn things. And another mistaken concept was was to think that because things were expanding and seemed to be going really well, that necessarily they are. You know, as I explained previously in the classes, that, you know, Bhagavan zone was exploding, you know, expanding, and we were like riding the waves of success. And, you know, Harikesha's zone also was like that, and there are other places that were not, you know, that apparently seemed to be doing great. And, you know, we do have this philosophy, Phalina Parichate, judge by the results, you know. You know, it can be a measure of spiritual success, but there's always a but. If pride and arrogance seep in, you know, if the attitude turns wrong, then even the best will just crash down hard and then experience the failure of success. The failure of success. So, you know, although I think we may start out with the right intentions, but, you know, as responsibilities grow, ambition can creep in and our mentality can change. You know, I think many devotees, you know, they work very hard, you know, especially leaders, gurus, people, you know, leading the way. They work hard and they do a lot of austerity and a lot of dedication. And then what happens? Well, success comes. It can come. And then the result of that can often be, then what happens? Okay, you get praised, you get honor, adoration, even worship, more facilities, money. And this may slowly over time go to one's head and subtly change you. And that's not always visible. It's an internal thing. I mean, it can also be visible. But pride, oh, whew, that nasty word. It seeps in, and then there's a loss of humility. And you start to think, I am the doer. Just see what I have done. And before you know it, we forget that we're just the postman handing over the message, and instead we think the message is coming from me. And the result? Become a mouse again. Become a mouse again. And we have watched this happen over and over. Lessons for us all, you know, that pride, it spoils our service. It's like the sand in the sweet rice. You know, you might be doing something really nice and then you feel good about it. And that's okay. We can feel good about doing service well or something you're happy. But then when you take pride in it, then that's like, you know, passing stool on some nice preparation. And then it becomes horribly ruined, and it just makes the whole thing stink. You know, these are sad things that happen everywhere in every society and but you know, again and again, we just have to learn and think about it. Think about how we're doing things. What are we thinking when we're doing things? And, you know, so important. But the main point, you know, that I would like to bring out is that the common denominator in all of what I've been describing, you know, the real problem is abuse of power. Abuse of power. That is the real issue. It's not like how we go about doing things or how high the seat is or how this or that, but abuse of power. And then how pride and superiority seep in. And from my perspective, I feel this is the real issue. It's not just that we have zonal acharyas or whatever. This is a real issue that's not, I don't feel, been adequately addressed. And thus you find that similar kinds of abuses of power, they go on and on and on in many places, on different levels of management, or even in the own home. It's not just about, big people. This is not just, I'm not just talking about, dissing management and GBC. I'm talking about all of us, that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he warns us over and over of all the types of demons that are there, those anarthas in our heart, and this Bakasura is one, this cunning, duplicity, cheating, deceptive behavior. And, so that's there, that's in the hearts of, it's more visible in the people that are, high up, but it's in all of us, to some degree or another, that we have to face it, because until such cheating propensities are actually destroyed, spiritual advancement is just checked. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also speaks of the Keshi demon and that superiority complex. That as one advances, he starts to feel superior to others. I'm better, more wise, I'm above others. So, we are now warned. We've seen it. And, we didn't really have so much of this information. We didn't have people in front of us. We didn't have elders, and we didn't have all of these, access, to all of this information that we have now. And, so of course we saw that many of the first gurus and many managers after Srila Prabhupada's departure fell prey to some, and some of these common things we've pointed out, and they were destroyed by the abuse of power. It's a common theme. The Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's endless stories of pride and abuse of power that even the greatest personalities in the universe have fallen prey to. So it's not surprising. I mean, Indra, Brahma, great personalities, So, these are things that we've seen happen over and over. And as I've said, of course, it's more visible in leaders who are out in the open, but these are lessons for each of us, also we're all dealing with some variety of anarthas, So these are just some reflections, mostly of kind of how the leadership dealt with the challenges that we faced. And again, they're just not unique to us, every spiritual group, you can read. I've read books, talking about different groups, and you could just switch the name to ISKCON. It's like everybody goes through this stuff. And, the thing is, so these problems, they will be there, and it's just more effective to, to look at the issues, learn the lessons, than to just trash the people who succumbed to these problems and these challenges, So I would like to do another part of this. Maybe I'll have to do a continued talk I think so, yeah. Too many. I hope it's not too boring, but I don't know. It just made me think of so much that I want to convey, even to myself. You know, but in this next part, I want to reflect on ways in which each of us responded to the difficulties that arose, you know, to just kind of turn the spotlight on ourselves instead of, you know, the gurus and the managers and what they did, you know, and look at how we contributed, you know, individually to the environment. Because I think we can also identify some very common behaviors and syndromes that were not healthy and even destructive. So, you know, we need to take responsibility for our own part in these stories, you know, whether our contribution helped or hindered the situation, you know. So devotees, you know, were faced with a lot. Being told to accept a guru they didn't want, being let down by gurus they chose, being marginalized or even being demonized, or just being confused and uncertain about what was going on. And there are many varieties of challenges. So, you know, but I could see that there's a common individual responses to these, you know, to these disappointments or disagreements or difficulties. Whatever, you know, wherever you were situated in the, you know, what you believed or didn't believe, or, but what was very, very common and continues to be very common is the victim mentality. You know, well, let's say the common syndrome is victim mentality. You know, these feelings that, you know, I was cheated, I was used, I was abused by gurus or ISKCON or management or somebody, and thus feeling justified in really, you know, whatever, very heavily bad-mouthing or, you know, leaving the society or not following the principles or whatever, you know. You know, and the most clear sign of this syndrome is a lot of anger and resentment and cynicism and suffering. And that just, you know, it results in an inability to move forward in life, a lack of ability to accept change and accept things that have happened and to embrace the lessons, you know. So I would say it results in stunted growth of the individual. And, you know, of course, bad things happened, you know, but if you stay in victim mode, you will only continue to punish yourself and no one else. And when we hold on to anger and self-righteousness, you know, identifying as a victim, you know, we just push away the possibility of inner peace, which is our natural state when we are Krishna conscious. And of course, you know, if you've been let down in a major way by guru, that is very difficult. And I wouldn't even, you know, I mean, how can you understand what some people have gone through? But then I see that a lot of those devotees, they tend to think that, well, I've just been cheated, and that everything that I experienced in devotional service in relationship to that guru was just a farce, and that all the experiences in service, it was just a mistake. And I just feel so sad when I see someone caught in that mentality because, you know, I mean, in some ways, of course, it's a natural reaction to extreme hurt. But I just find it terribly sad that it's almost like, you know, such an offense to yourself. You know, not validating your own experiences. It's like gaslighting yourself. To not allow yourself to remember the good things you experienced. Really, it's like abusing yourself, invalidating all the experiences that you had. And but we need to remember the wonderful things that we experienced in Krishna consciousness. That's never false. You know, the fallen behavior of the guru, it doesn't make you fallen. It does not diminish or invalidate the genuine devotional experiences that you've performed, or the joy you experienced in kirtans, or in classes, or in service. Because the thing is, if you learned from your spiritual master, if you learned that you're a pure spirit soul, and that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and devotional service and chanting the holy name is the method to reach him and the goal of life, then you have not been cheated. If you receive the holy name, you have not been cheated. That these gifts, they are most rare and precious. And, you know, the things that you learn from Guru, we must appreciate. What has come to us through whatever avenue we received it. You know, who was it that got through the prostitute? Bilva Mangala, was it? You know, not cheated, not tricked, not fooled. If our intention is correct, there is never loss. We can't know someone else's heart. We can't, you know, make their intention. We can only make our own intention, and Krishna understands our hearts. And we can only do the right thing. We can't make others do it, even Guru, you know. So the thing is that no one can take away from you the gift of devotional service that you were given. And also no one else can open up that gift and utilize it for you. So I just feel like, you know, I would like that if devotees who have suffered through that could see more in this light. I do see there are many that have gone on, incredible devotees that have gone on and understood these points and made a lot of advancement and gone forward. But then there are those that I feel sad that have, you know, kind of lost on the wayside, you know, and that's a sad thing. And no doubt this is, you know, a very challenging situation to pass through. And, you know, difficult, like worse than a divorce. You know, when people are divorcing, they just remember only the bad things. But if we are to heal, you know, we must remember that I once loved this person, and that was real. And to lose that memory, that's sad. So, you know, this syndrome, victim mentality, there's a close cousin to the victim mentality is the blame game syndrome. Similar, but a little bit different. You know, that during all the difficulties and, you know, ongoing today, we see people of different gurus, different camps, you know, constantly, you know, pointing the finger and blaming this one and that one for all their problems or the problems of the institution. And especially blaming the institution for how my life came out or whatever, and blaming the GBC and the guru for all that is bad and for why I'm failing in my life. And yes, sure, we need to understand mistakes, but the blame game is more than that. We become unenthusiastic in service, maybe even give it up, or giving up chanting, developing bad habits, do nothing to improve ourselves or the mission, and all the while just blaming everyone else for where I am. And people can wallow in this mentality, stuck for 40 years, 50 years, missing so many opportunities to progress, and years can be lost in just commiserating with others who are stuck in the same mentality, or arguing with others about how the big they, ruined my life, but this is a dead-end street and leads to certain unhappiness. Once I heard some disciples speaking, like 30 years later, and they were still really, the way they were speaking, they were really blaming and hating and talking in a very nasty fashion towards the guru who had, left and disappointed them. And, I was listening and I was feeling sorry, to hear them speak like that, and, also understanding how hard it may be. But, I couldn't help but, I kind of at one point I said to them, really? You always hated him? Then, why did you write those loving devotional words and beautiful poems to your spiritual master in the Vyasa Puja book? I mean, why did you do that? You have to look at your part of it. What was your part in there? You always hated? So either you were lying, or maybe you were trying to impress someone, or maybe you felt pressured to do it, or maybe you did have some very genuine appreciation for what that person did for you. But, it's very important that you know what motivation you had, and, validate it, deal with it, look it in the eye, So, healing these syndromes, it begins only when we can take responsibility for also our own actions and our own beliefs and feelings. And we must remember that we were young, but we were adults who made choices. And no one can force you. No one had a gun to our head. There's social pressure. There might have been pressure on us. But I always act of my own free will. I must. And if I did something I didn't believe in, or I went along with something, even if I didn't like it, then I have to know, why did I do that? We must look at our own motivations. Although my desire to serve was perhaps genuine, but maybe I got some perks from being near the guru that I became attached to. Maybe I also had, lesser or confused motivations, including, maybe I was just wishing to be loved, or I just had a strong desire to belong, or maybe I needed to fill my internal emptiness, or maybe I wished to be special, or, maybe I was infected with, I think they call it the ashram disease, or group think, a kind of codependency where I felt I just had to go with the group. It's important to take responsibility for our own decisions. And there's no harm. Rather, much benefit is there if we can admit, You know, what I might have done that was not so great. And as the saying goes, you know, a man can fail many times, but he isn't a failure until he begins to blame somebody else. So these even material, you know, these little quotes that are out there, they apply. You know, so let's be honest and do the work. And none of us is perfect. And there's a lot of work to do. So we should really try not to stay stuck in these syndromes because it's such a loss, wasting time in life, you know, because victims and blamers, they tend to get locked in the past and they just can't move forward. You know, so there's, you know, suggestion for taking responsibility for our own part and, you know, try to stop watering things that were never meant to grow in your life. You know, water what works, what's good, what's right, and stop playing around with the, you know, dead bones and stuff you can't fix. It's over, leave it alone. If you water what's divine, then you will see harvest, for sure. So stop wasting water on dead issues and dead relationships and dead people and a dead past. No matter how much you water concrete, you cannot grow a garden. So, you know, we're just pointing out some of the ways that we stay stuck, you know. But how do we get unstuck? How do we move forward? It's not easy, you know, it's not. But one of the first recommendations you can find materially and spiritually first is just the acceptance of adversity. Just acknowledging we cannot stop it, but we can decide how we will respond to it. And I think I will end here because it's maybe getting a bit much, but I still have a lot more to talk about. But it's probably too much to swallow in one gulp. And I don't know, maybe it's, you know, just a bit much going through all this stuff, but I don't know, I felt the need to explore it myself and share my thoughts if they're of any use. Hare Krishna.